Greetings, happy warriors, and welcome to the Rabbi Daniel Lapin Show, where I, your rabbi, reveal how the world really works. And one of the ways the world really works is that it's necessary for a satisfactory, successful, fulfilling, happy life that you concentrate on all the 5 F's. And occasionally, some of them feel more urgent, even more important than the others. So, for instance, very often I talk to people who are very actively engaged on finance and to a lesser extent on family and to some extent on fitness, but very little on friendship and on faith. That's a very common error. And so what that means, obviously, is that people are doing their best to make a living. People are doing their best to get hold of money, all of which, as any long-time listener already knows, is a very mistaken approach, and one that is going to trip you up until you land face first in the mud. But it's a very common one. And then people, well, the next most important thing is family. And they're focused on that. Now, family extends, as you well know, to all relationships that are directly or indirectly a consequence of a male-female intimate relationship. So obviously, finding a partner, marriage, children, parent-child relationships, relationships between siblings, and so on and so forth. And so when I put it in terms of, if I were to put it in more prosaic terms and say sex and money, well, then there are a lot of people who assign 90% of their waking hours, attention, and energy to securing those 2 areas of life. But it actually goes way beyond that. When I say family, it does also include parent-child relationships. And that's important because whilst parents tend to love their children unconditionally, and as time goes by, even once their children are older, they love them more and more. The other way around, not so much. Children loving parents and being devoted to parents, we see a lot less. And I have spoken in the past about the tendency of the mental health industry to drive a wedge between children and parents. Recently, I discussed the area of mental illness categorized in the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of the Mental Health Profession under narcissistic personality disorder. And almost invariably, whichever route you follow through the forest of narcissistic personality disorder, all routes lead almost invariably to the same conclusion, which is you probably need to sever relationships between you and your parents. And I've spoken in the past, right here on this show, that in ways that we don't necessarily fully explain, we actually do need relationships with our parents, much more than we realize, much more of your equanimity and internal harmony and sense of stability and order in your universe flows from having a good relationship with your parents. And finances are finances, and faith encompasses a lot of areas. And most importantly, I would say, to understand, is not so much the obvious one, that a relationship with God is something that many of us resist, but many of us need way beyond our realization. And the idea that faith, the F of faith, also includes the intangibles, the spiritual areas of life. And there are so many areas having to do with proper maintenance of male-female relationships, proper running of business affairs that do depend on intangible spiritual factors. And once people understand the extent to which many financial decisions are made not on rational consequences of careful analysis of profit and loss statements, no, on the contrary, people make many financial decisions on a spiritual trigger, how it makes them feel or what they want to do. And in the area of finance, you do need to understand. So, yes, faith fits into finance very strongly. It fits into male-female relationships and marriage very strongly. So I remind people constantly, I understand that you are somewhat focused on finance and family, but here's why you really would be making a mistake to ignore the F of faith. Okay, fine, all right. Well, we'll take care of that. Fitness. Many people understand that and even pay lip service to it. Obviously, regulating what you eat and ensuring that you have adequate exercise. These are difficult things, and people very often need coaching help. Sometimes people have a trainer, a fitness trainer, a dietitian, but sometimes having an outside person to help you remain accountable to your goals is very helpful. And that just leaves the area of friendship. And friendship, on the surface of it, one tends to think, oh, well, I know what friendship is. It's my social relationships. But wait, it's so much more than that. Remember that every area of life fits into one or more of these 5 Fs. And so I pose to you the question, where does your political affiliations fit? Where do your political affiliations fit, I say? In other words, let's imagine you are affiliated with a group of people of a political persuasion. All right, let's say you belong to a conservative club. Where does that fit? I mean, these are not necessarily friends. It's certainly not, church, the people you know at church, well, that could fit under faith, but it might also fit under friendship as well. Why? Well, because here's the way to organize this. The way to organize this is to say to yourself, does it fit into family? And does it fit into finance? If the answer is no to both those questions, no, the person is not related to me by blood or by marriage, these people are not in the club because they are all part of the Lapin family, no. So it's nothing to do with family. Does it have to do with how I serve humanity financially? Does it have anything to do with my work, my career, my profession? No, they don't. So the answer is that it fits under friendship. So even though you may not actually think of these people as friends, and maybe they aren't friends, the association does fall under friendship. And that's where all things social, things like, let's imagine there's a homeowners association and you sit on the board of the homeowners association of where you live. Let's say you go to city council meetings. Okay, all of those fit under friendships, even though many of the people involved are not people you are friends with, and maybe you don't even want to be friends with them. Doesn't matter. Friendship is a broad heading of all human relationships that are not financial and are not family. And that, of course, brings us to the area of the Charlie Kirk assassination. And I've written and spoken on that, and so have many, many other people, including some extraordinary obituaries and eulogies, some superb analyses, and as well as a lot of silly nonsense. Among the unfunny comedians is Jimmy Kimmel, who just lost his position. At the moment, it's a suspension, and the result of that is that he is probably going to move towards career and professional irrelevancy. Why do I say that? Well, because Jimmy Kimmel has no understanding of the 5 Fs. And he therefore, along with many of his friends and supporters, are making the erroneous decision that Disney ABC suspended his show and various television station networks like Sinclair Television cancelled him indefinitely. And he and his friends, many of them, think that this is a First Amendment issue having to do with the Constitution of the United States, the First Amendment of which in the Bill of Rights speaks of freedom of speech, being able to speak openly. And he assumes that that is what this is, but it isn't. It is a property rights issue. It's an issue that very simply has to say that your right to say what you wish does not compel me to give you a platform on which to say it. It's so straightforward and obvious it barely needs saying, but I'm going to say it anyway just because I'm seeing out there that there are many people that you, my happy warriors, may find yourself needing to explain this to. And so it's very simple. This has to do with money, not with free speech. And money is the lubricant of human interaction. It's a good thing. It's part of God's design for human cooperation and connection and communication and collaboration. And what they're saying to him is, and this is exactly what happened, they said, whoa, that's no good. You need to apologize. And had he done that, had he simply said, I was wrong, it turns out that it was not what I said, and I regret having hurt people, and I shouldn't have said that. Had he done that, he would have emerged from this just fine. Nobody would have said or done anything. But he doubled down. He told his bosses, not going to apologize, and I'm going to emphasize it more. So they said, well, then you're off the air. Simple as that. And that's exactly what they're entitled to do. And, there is no problem with that at all. In the same way that a newspaper can fire a journalist, an editor of a newspaper has the overall authority of what gets printed in the newspaper and what doesn't, and it has nothing to do with the journalist's freedom of speech. So that's an important thing to understand. But in addition to the foolishness, as I said, many wonderful things have been said and written. Oceans of words and rivers of ink have been written, much of it quite wonderful, about Charlie Kirk. However, there is still a little more that I need to add to the conversation on Charlie Kirk, and that is to refute one of the big lies that is being circulated by the left. And it goes something like this. Neither side has a monopoly on violence. Both sides must stop the violence. It's everybody. It's people on the left and the right. It's liberals and conservatives. It's Democrats and Republicans. There's too much violence in America's political debate. We must get rid of the violence, and we must replace the violence with civil discourse, because this is an evil that permeates right and left. That, my friends, is a big lie. Which is not to say that you cannot find violence perpetrated by conservatives, by the right, of course. But intelligent, rational, thinking people must be able to distinguish both quantity and quality. We've got to see the difference. We've got to be able to acknowledge that there is a disproportionate number of recent shootings that have been perpetrated within the purview of the transgender world. Right? There's this weird, intense transgender association with the alleged assassin. I keep saying the word alleged, right, as if there's any question, of Charlie Kirk. The Nashville shooting, the shooting in Minneapolis, it doesn't stop. So you've got to be able to acknowledge that. You can't, well, it's both sides. No, this is actually very different. And you've also got to be able to acknowledge the difference in style and approach. And this extends to the furthest reaches of the left and the furthest reaches of the right. The right is not as violent as the left. Right? There is no moral equivalence when it comes to violence. We've got to be able to see that. The left's primary initial recourse is to violence, and the right is a restraint on violence. Think about it. Look at what's been happening. Take a glance at history. And to take a glance at history, it might also be helpful to take a quick look at the terms left and right. We find that these terms show up for the first time in 1789, I think, at the time of the French Revolution, where the chaos caused by the revolution resulted in the setting up of what they called the French National Assembly. And I think that was 1792. And it was very contentious, and obviously some of the arguments and the fights and the vituperativeness of the French Revolution carried into the chamber. And so the delegates tended to arrange themselves. To the right of the president sat all those who were traditionalists. They were the Catholics. They were the people who remained somewhat loyal to the ancien regime, to the ancient regime. They were the people who remained committed to tradition, many, many, many years of French tradition. And on the left of the king sat the revolutionaries. And at the time, one of the delegates was a man called Baron de Gauville, and spelled Gauville. And he's on record as having said, and I'm quoting the translation from French, obviously, "We began to recognize each other. Those who were loyal to religion and the king took up positions to the right of the chair so as to avoid the shouts, oaths, and indecencies that enjoyed free rein in the opposing camp." And so from then onwards to the present day, the French National Assembly today still, in broad terms, has the Marie Le Pen crowd sitting on the right, and that's what's enabled the left to effectively demonize the right as racist and homophobes. And, well, the right generally and traditionally includes people who took the Bible seriously. Now, wherever you stand on the question of homosexuality, you have to admit that in the Judeo-Christian tradition, as articulated in the Bible, it is a sin. Now, you can be the most liberated, pro-gay advocate, but that simple reality can't be denied. And so those people who are traditionally committed to the Bible as a blueprint of human existence, those people are going to oppose homosexuality. They're also going to oppose the transgender movement. You know why? Because at the very beginning of Genesis, it says, male and female, he created them. Right? God created two sexes or two genders, same thing, male and female. And so, again, wherever you stand on this, if you are deeply committed to the idea that a man can become a woman and a woman can become a man, I know there are people like that. I've had conversations with people like that. Nonetheless, you would have to agree, if you are going to remain intellectually honest, you have to admit that it is an anti-Bible position. So obviously, the right, as it is made up of those who would oppose that those areas, and the left is made up of those, because the left is revolutionary in nature. Think about what the French Revolution was. It was an uprooting of the existing order. And the general rule with revolutions is that before you tear down a fence, make sure you know what it was put up for in the first place. It's possible that it was put up to keep wicked beasts away, not wicked, but beasts away from your flock. And now, after many years, there are no more beasts anymore, so we don't need that fence. That's possible. On the other hand, it's quite possible that on today's sunny day, innocuous and benign, you have no idea what evils that fence was put up to hold at bay. And as soon as you tear it down, well, those destructive forces come roaring back. It could be either way. But revolutions are the tearing down of existing structures, very often fences, things that we often call traditions. So when people speak of traditional marriage or traditional families, it makes perfect sense that the revolution is by nature going to oppose traditional marriage and traditional families. And so it was in the French Revolution, and so it was in the Chinese Revolution of the middle of the 20th century, and so it was of the Russian Revolution in the early 20th century, and so it was in the Cambodian Revolution. Wholesale, deliberate destruction of marriage and family. Not surprisingly, everything connected with the left in American politics, and I dare say it would be true in European as well, everything connected with the left is committed to destruction of the family. The mental health profession is entirely in the hands of the left. And I have spoken in the past about how disproportionate the Jewish percentage of the medical profession in general is. In other words, there are about 6 times as many Jewish doctors as there should be if the number of doctors was kept to the proportion of Jews in the general population, which in the United States of America is about 1.5%. Well, 1.5% of doctors are not Jewish. Many, many more. Over 10% of doctors are Jewish. How about psychiatrists? How about doctors in the mental health industry? Well, it's about 2.5 times more in that. And I did a whole podcast a couple of years back on why Jews are so disproportionately represented in the psychiatric and psychological areas of human health, the whole so-called mental health industry. I've covered that, but it does have a lot to do with secularism. It has to do with the idea that, in general, the mental health industry, since Sigmund Freud, has been obsessed with finding a secular way of dealing with spiritual unease, with spiritual problems, including spiritual problems that then manifest themselves psychosomatically in physical forms. That's not the specific topic of today's discussion, so I won't dwell any longer on that. But I will revert back to the main concept that I am articulating here, which is that revolutions of the left are always anti-religious, which also means anti-family. And just to clarify, there are two occasions, two movements in history that get called revolutions, but they were not revolutions at all. They were certainly not revolutions of the left. And those were the English Civil War, the Cromwellian Revolution in the 1600s, and then, of course, the American Revolutionary War in the 1700s. Those were not movements of the left. In both cases, they were movements of the right. And therefore, I want to present for your consideration. Yeah. As you know, I present information for you to analyze. I don't tell you what to think. I certainly don't tell you what to believe, but information that any open-minded, intellectually honest person needs to contemplate is this reality that the left is anti-religious and anti-family. The right is Judeo-Christian based religious and pro-family. Well, that's not all. The left is consistently and reliably anti-free market, anti-capitalism, anti-individuals being free to make whatever economic and financial arrangement they mutually and consensually and voluntarily deem to be to their benefit and to their advantage. The left is hostile to that and ideally wants central governmental control of as much of economic interaction as possible, and the right tends towards giving people the right to make what they consider to be advantageous decisions. You might say, in a sense, that the left infantilizes human beings, and the right gives human beings the complement of being sentient agents of their own advantage. And so, again, you don't need a lot of proof for this reality, because it's something you see yourself, and it's something you are well aware of. And that is that, whether it is the French Revolution, hostile to clergy, hostile to the church, and hostile to the free market, centralized control. The Russian Revolution goes without saying, and similarly for the Cambodian and the Chinese, and what is happening in America since about 1962. I say about, could have said the early 60s. Again, a revolution has been taking place in Western civilization. It's a revolution that undermines family and that undermines free economic association of people, right? And that's something that I think everybody understands, everybody can clearly see for themselves. Okay, well, that being the case, anything else? Does the left focus on anything other than being against the family and against free economic initiative? Well, yes. The left is in favor of violence, right? And the history books of the French Revolution are fascinating to see how quickly it devolved from we love everybody, and this is to give everybody freedom and brotherhood and fraternity and equality, how quickly it turned into a bloodlust, and how the blood, literally the blood that poured from the guillotine, helped to inflame the mob. Look, it's not an accident. It's not a coincidence. If you see things in terms of this overall format that I am trying to depict for you here, it makes perfect sense that in the summer of 2020, a common criminal by the name of George Floyd, who died at what? At most, you can say, at the hands of police carelessness, but the idea that he was murdered by Derek Chauvin is not correct. And the continued incarceration of Derek Chauvin is without question an injustice. And who knows, but, there may well be a retrial that there ought to be. And, the notion of treating, anyway, off topic, okay? Was it a murder? Wasn't a murder. Was he an upright, good man? Far from it, meaning George Floyd. And the result is the summer of destruction. Many, many deaths, arson, fires, blood, violence. That is the response of the left. The response of the right, prayer vigils, is what followed after the assassination of Charlie Kirk. It makes perfect sense. You shouldn't be scratching your head saying, now I wonder why the cities didn't brace for violence after the assassination of George Floyd. After the assassination of Charlie Kirk. Were the cities expecting arson, destruction, looting? Were they expecting violence and killing? No, and it didn't happen. Because there is no moral equivalence between the left and the right. When it comes to violence, the left naturally defaults to violence. That's a very important distinction. Why? What is behind it? Well, a lot of that you're going to be able to figure and think through for yourself, but just one part of it I'll explain, which is that the key to civilization is the right. The attempt to destroy Western civilization is a project of the left. That's not me saying it. It's one after another of the heroes of the left, going way back. Their project is the destruction of Western civilization and then replacing it with something much, much better. But it always involves the deaths of millions. The people that Stalin killed, the people the Chinese Revolution killed, tens of millions. The people that the Cambodian Revolution killed, tens of millions. Always that way. Why? Because one of the articles of civilization is the replacement of bullets with ballots, a system of voting rather than a system of killing. And so if civilization is committed to the replacing of violence with debate and talk, then obviously the opposite is the left, and its intent to destroy civilization employs civilization's inherent weakness. What is civilization's inherent weakness? That after a period of civilized existence, the number of men who are capable of dealing with violence declines until we reach where we are today in America, where the average productive civilized man lives a largely sedentary lifestyle, doing his business, taking care of his family, being involved with his friends, his finance, his family, and his faith and his fitness. But the idea of a person who is able to withstand the shock effect of violence, fewer and fewer people are in that position. And there's been a lot of talk and analysis again of how the 9/11 hijackers were able to subdue a plane. And the way was, anyone with any knowledge and experience of this knows that the ordinary human being, man or woman, is shocked, literally shocked. When I say shock, I mean a physiological state of shock by the cutting of the throat of a stewardess. That is what did it. The blood on what was a perfectly ordinary Tuesday morning, on an early morning flight that should have been a relaxing few hours till the destination. All of a sudden, when that happens, it drives almost everybody, civilized people, into a state of complete inability to think or move. That's the weakness of civilization. And it is a weakness that the left constantly and routinely exploits by the infliction of violence at the earliest stage in the most intense possible form. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is my attempt, Happy Warriors, to refute the lie that there is moral equivalence and there's violence on both sides. Not even remotely true. It's a big lie that gets repeated often, but we should not fall for it. And so until our next opportunity to be together, that is as far as we go. And I'm Rabbi Daniel Lapin, reminding you to become a happy warrior and enjoy the bonus podcasts that are available for each and every happy warrior. And until the next time, I wish you progress onwards and upwards with your faith and your family, your finances, your friendships, and your fitness. I'm Rabbi Daniel Lapin. God bless.